All
So,
right.
welcome, Hopeful Tribe. Today, I have a really special friend of mine here. Her name is Tiny, aka Lisa Gray-Garcia. Amazing, wonderful person. And we're going to talk about homefulness, which is a poor people led solution to homelessness, which we actually talked a little bit about in the last interview with Abby Lehrman. Did you see that one, Tiny?
Yes, I loved it. Beautiful.
Cool, cool. Yeah, I feel like I have had the honor to meet some of the most amazing elders working on the streets, and I want to interview all of them for
Yes.
public consumption so that people
Right.
can understand what actually works. Because
Yes.
what I often hear when I'm talking about homelessness out in the world, out in the mainstream, is that well, people want to do something about it, but they think it's just too complicated.
Right. 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 Exactly. Well,
Mhm.
I don't know if I should jump in, but I will
Yeah,
always,
jump in.
begin with verse. I'm a poet. I'm a member of the Poets Project. But I'm a cultural worker and as a poverty scholar. And I always say, I am that poverty scholar, that houseless mama, that houseless daughter, all those people you don't want to see, never want to be, look away from me. What you going to do, arrest me? We're in your city. I also add that, see that houseless mama and daughter sleeping in a tent? That's because we don't got money for the rent. And normally I rock my jailhouse attire because me and my poor mama did jail time for the poverty crime of being houseless in this occupied indigenous holler. Starting every conversation, recognizing that we're on, occupied First Nations land in this particular Bay Area, so-called Bay Area. We're on Ohlone Lishan land, lifting up our brothers and sisters who struggled with that genocide, called colonization, as we fast forward into this moment we're in, the so-called 21st century, and in what I call Greg time, Gregorian time, to recognize that that never ended, and that also our warriors are still here 528 years later, and that our relationships with Mama Earth are not in right relationship, any of us right now in this time. And so, yeah, just lifting up my mama, for without whom there'd be no me. A mixed race orphan who transitioned way too young because of the violence of racism and poverty, um, literally starvation. Uh, Her body was molested over 210 times by the time she was 3 years old. I always lift up my mama on that because sometimes even the concept of resilience, and I know you know me about this, I'm not really with it. I think that some of us folks who struggle and survive through those kinds of things, we just keep putting our clothes on and keep it moving because what else are we gonna do? So right, so there's that. Um, but I'm blessed and honored to be invited on here. I love you, Sue, and I love that your vision is really about, looking at this different way of living on Mama Earth. Um, when homefulness, as we're talking about today, homefulness with one L, um, a homeless people's solution to homelessness. I'd like your listeners and viewers just to hold that in their minds and hearts for a second, because it really is so much about a prayer as well. Um, but one of the things is when it was just a dream. That was when me and Ma were on the street, sleeping in bus shelters, park benches, the back seat of a hoopty when we were lucky enough to have one before it was towed, meaning, broke down car, which they were always towed, because that's what the city does to poor people's vehicles. Anyway, my mom dreamed of homefulness at that moment because one of the things that she would talk about a lot is that isolation kills. Just holding
Mhm.
that peace, right? Isolation specifically, really, in a very terrifying way, impacts poor single parents,
Mm.
um, right? And in so many different aspects, before we were houseless, my mom was trying to hold on by any means necessary, like all us mamas do, right? Holding on to the non-profiteer job by any means necessary, trying to actually, get up and out of poverty. I mean, all of those things, yeah, because I'm half colonizer. Like my dad was a wealth hoarder, and he basically left us on the street when I was 4 years old. And so, Ma, who was always po and always struggle, and a mixed race woman, and dealt with all kinds of ish, was doing that whole get off welfare, try to make it in the capitalist hamster wheel notion of success, but she was a revolutionary. So she was in what I affectionately call anti-social work job. uh, she had worked for years to get that paper, literally decades, because, us poor mamas who go through school, it takes us way longer.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
right? But she did that and got this job off of health fair, as Sister Viv calls it. And yeah, that part. And anyway, and so she was doing what we now call revolutionary love work, which I know that is one of the love workers who helped us in Decolonize Academy and Poor Magazine. Um, but basically, what that meant is not working as an agent of the state, not being a mandated reporter, but and not looking the other way. Actually, bringing families in closer. She was in a quote closed placement for girls, quote unquote at risk, all those kind of terms, right? And she uh, she had done this. She was doing this powerful work and practicing family restoration, not family separation. And
Mhm.
right, and that's a radical thing within that field. I know you know. And so, sure enough, after a period of time of doing a powerful work in that realm, in that way, after practicing what we would call revolutionary love work, bringing families together, living into this way that we believe of interdependence, not the cult of independence. This white psychologist fired her and said she was unsupervisable. And I bring up, yeah, yeah,
I love
right. Isn't that beautiful? I know that you feel me on that. I mean, the scary part is that you know my mom really tried. She really tried. And I bring up race in this way, not because race is the only thing that plays in. It was that that person was perpetrating white supremacist values of separation, right? Of what I affectionately call the therapy industrial complex, this
Mhm.
heteropatriarchal, concepts of normal, right? All that, and did not see the liberation, the revolution, um, the love work of my mom. Didn't see it at all. In fact, immediately tagged it as absolutely criminal, right outside the box. It was funny because it was a convent, and believe it or not, the nuns who were all from the global south, they loved my mom. They were like,
Mhm.
this is what we're trying to do here, and you're doing it. It was so sad, because of course they'd all been colonized into the church and all that shit too, but they saw my mom as someone who actually practicing this value of love, anyway,
Right.
right? And so anyway, that was the final straw. That was, as Mama said, one little murder of the soul too many. And we ended up outside. I was 11 years old. And at that point, as the tiny saying goes, I had to drop out of institutional schools and enroll full time in the School of Hard Knocks, where I'm proud to say I graduated with a PhD in poverty. Uh, and again, not glamorizing that. That stuff almost killed us, and real talk
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. And what one of the things I think has always really amazed me about you is that even though, and maybe not even though, because you dropped out of the institution um, at such a young age, you think more critically and more clearly than anyone else I've ever talked to.
Thank you
You
for that.
know, I mean, so Tiny has come and guest lectured with me at my old graduate school, or as I like to call it, gradual school, because it took me a long time as a poor single mom to get through it.
Love it. Gradual.
But it's, I was teaching, what was it, multicultural counseling in the family, and I asked Tiny to come in and guest lecture, I think a couple times. Um, and she was just brilliant, not only about working with people in poverty, but also in facilitating the group. And let me tell you, the students at CIIS are not easily facilitated. You know, these are some super smart, mostly from privileged people. And people who come from privilege are just not easily facilitated. They have a lot of objections
Yeah.
and misunderstandings and a belief that their voice should always be heard, right? Which is
Yes.
something that poor people, you kind of have to talk them into having a voice, right? Like it's not a thing they're growing up thinking they are due, right?
Right.
But people of privilege have grow up with that belief that their
Yeah.
voices need to be heard, you
Yeah.
know?
At all
So
times.
I have to say, I was just stunned the first time you came and guest lectured at how deftly you managed that class. I was like, what?
Thank you. Thank you, Sue.
So while I'm sure when you were a little girl and you had to drop out of school, it felt, not so easy. I feel like it's what really cultivated your brilliance.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for that. And you're making my mama smile because, part of the whole, and it's funny that you're like diving in a little bit on this because it's an interesting one I don't get to talk about enough. But, at the time I had this whole obscure object of desire, like somehow school was the savior, and it was in a way because we were houseless. And when I'd go to school, I'd get breakfast and lunch and like a sanity moment, and we know that as educators and caregivers, that's real for our youth in poverty. That's the one place, that you can go. That's why it's so deep and difficult on so many levels when you have racist classes, educators, and yeah. But anyway, so I could never go back, and it was really interesting because it wasn't for lack of trying. It was like they just I didn't have an address, and a lot of school districts then, but even still, won't let you enroll if you don't have a physical address. There's been pushback on that, especially in California. They don't get to do that anymore. But anyway, I didn't have a physical address. But then even more deeply, and I think this was the hardest one of all, because this is where essentially again those capitalist white supremacist notions of normal, um,
Hmm.
right, so often hurt us as poor people, as indigenous people, as in black and brown peoples. And one of the things that had happened at that point is that I had to start being basically a caregiver for my mom. She became disabled after all that trauma. It was the final straw. And I would tell that to my teacher, and with in earnest, and love, and like I thinking she'd listen, right? Instead, she mandated reported me,
Uh,
and yeah, and called the frickin' CPS and the truant officer. And that I just recently did a children's book. I don't know if you saw it, When Mama and Me Lived Outside. It's a
mm-mm.
new, oh, it's a new one. People should check out poorpress.net. for all the powerful books by all the poverty scholars who I am blessed to work with, as well as myself and Leroy and others who are doing children's books. But my goal with children's books is really to create a different protagonist that's not out there, like a houseless mama and daughter, right?
Yes, that's
Right,
brilliant.
right. And the other is an elder who's disabled, has been gentra effed out of their neighborhood, their barrio. But anyway, so one of the things that happened in that trail of tears with me and Ma was, they called the freaking system. That's what they do. They didn't hear me, and they basically criminalized the concept of me working to support my mama. And it wasn't that I was going to be gone all sometime. It's just that I had to be absent sometimes. And there I was, honestly telling them this, begging and hoping that they'd let me, stay in this ridiculous like elementary school, middle school. And they're like, no, as a matter of fact, not only no, but we've deemed your life criminal, and then I ended up getting, that was like a whole thing. And it just continued from there. And so we knew at that point we had to hide, that was it. That was the last contact with, yeah. So, it's a very deep one. I love that you said that it helped me, or not help me, but lifted up, critique and clarity. I think that was one of the key things that my mom used to say in her special ghetto fabulous fierce way, which I won't get into detail, but she was essentially with some expletives. Why do we even want to go back to that white place? That was sort of the answer, right? And actually real, and it had to do a lot of healing and a lot of decolonizing in my own mind to get
Mm-hmm.
right, to get to a point where I can sit here before you now and say I am honored and proud
Mm-hmm.
that I could care for my mama and not take part in that lie anymore. But I didn't feel that for a long time, Sue. And
Oh, I'm sure.
right, right. But you're
It
right.
I feel like it takes a lifetime to kind of
Right.
recover from our childhood.
Yes, that part you already know. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, I I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying that coming out of that, which is one of the many lessons that's led to even what we're doing now, right? It also became very clear that the institutional school model, albeit the only thing we often have, although this whole charter scenario, there's all kinds of cheese made back and forth on whether that's good or not, and this and that and the other, but that really doesn't work for specifically in my mind for houseless and disabled students who are in a very much deep poverty. It really doesn't, and actually that it's one of the reasons that we've built Decolonize Academy today, which is one of the education dream models of homefulness, and here we are doing it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so there's that, yeah. So I mean, so essentially coming out of that moment in time, there was a whole lot of things that, happened. Um, Very, very serious things. Again, I do not want to gloss over for listeners and viewers, especially if you're talking to folks who have different forms of privilege, the violence of being houseless in this stolen land. Yes. So basically, after we just started hiding, fear of police, fear of sweeps, we've actually experienced a sweep, and then I got put in foster care, all these kind of, horrible things. Uh, which is what the children's book is about too, because I just that story just has to be told. But anyway, among other things, um, then we also did an underground business because that's what poor families do, and we were vendors on the street with art, and like thousands and millions of micro negocios, small businesses all across Mama Earth. People don't assume or connect that to the the global north or the so-called, Americlan reality, but a lot of us are involved in underground businesses and economies. And we were criminalized for that too. We didn't have the money for licenses. And so there was this whole thing about that, but we kept doing it because that's what you do. And we worked really hard and we tried to get business loans and blah, blah, blah. And all that adage about it takes money to make money and all that stuff is all absolutely true. Yeah, like we had none of those things. And so we were barely always holding on, barely able to collect enough for the rent. We would stay in motels and that would drain all our money. Then we would be back on the street again. It was just this endless vicious cycle. And real talk. Fast forward to when I turned 18, and at that point, the criminalizing of houseless bodies, which is real. For those of you who don't know, it's illegal to sit, stand, live, be, or breathe while houseless in this occupied indigenous territory. And it's real important to say that because sometimes people don't even know it, right?
Yeah.
Right. And they don't even know that, like, just for instance, in San Francisco alone, there's over 200 laws on the books that criminalize houseless bodies. One or two isn't enough. We have to make over 200. In Oakland, similarly, and recently, right in a pandemic, with so-called conscious legislators, this encampment ban was passed. Absolutely shameful. Absolutely shameful. Sweeps are happening in a pandemic. Sweeps, hygienic metaphors about getting rid of human beings,
Mm-hmm.
like we're trash,
Mm-hmm.
right? So at 18, these tickets that we'd accrued for being houseless and for sleeping in our vehicle when we had one all came to head, and I ended up getting arrested by UC Berkeley police, thrown against the wall, and thrown into their little micro jail, and then taken to Santa Rita, and did 3 months hard time for the act of being houseless. you know
Mm.
and I just want to lift that up because, again, I don't think that people understand the deep criminality that's associated with poverty, and that this country was built and stolen on that same narrative.
Yes.
Right? Don't get it twisted. The same mess that they took to your indigenous territory in the Philippines, the same mess that they took to the island nations, the same mess that colonial terror across Mama Earth is the same mess they used here, against indigenous peoples here, but also poor peoples here. Poverty has always been an act of criminality in the U.S. since it was taken and stolen. Um,
Mm-hmm.
right? It started with things called the Popper laws and the Ugly laws that criminalized indigenous and disabled people's bodies for being in public, while disabled. Shout out to my brother Leroy Moore and to all the warriors on Crip Hop Nation and others. But also, it also began with this very important thing in the conversation, which is the associated shame with poverty. Because we as poor people have taken that shame on. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we we've internalized that. We're all failures. We made bad choices. I mean,
Right.
right? You made a bad choice, Phil. That's why you were homeless. I just want you to know that. Bad
Yeah,
choice.
yeah.
Bad Sue. Yeah,
And it's not that we don't make bad choices. Sure, like all human beings make bad choices sometimes, but that's not
yeah,
what led to
yeah,
people's poverty, you
yeah.
know?
Well, and it's a really interesting, terrifying kind of thinned out derivative narrative also of again, this idea that wealth hoarding and land stealing is a model of success. Right.
Hmm.
Right. So you can't, yeah, right.
Yeah,
You can't,
I have to say, before I got the dream about starting Hopeful Tribe, I had gotten my real estate license in
right.
California and was trying to build a business to help fund like these real solutions to homelessness, like Homefulness, right?
Right.
Um, but I ended up getting really sick
Yeah.
because I was just in my colonized mind and, not taking care of myself. And so it derailed my real estate business. And, I couldn't be more grateful at this point because I just don't think I can do it. I don't have the heart to sell off pieces of,
Yeah.
the mother
Yeah.
anymore. And
Yeah.
and and I think this is a good time to segue into stolen land tours. You want to tell us about those?
Yes. Well, first of all, I love you, and I know that I kind of when I was watching you do that, I was like, I don't think that's gonna last a long time. But I was just quiet. I mean, essentially, Sue, you're too badass, revolutionary, and a lover of people. So yeah, that part. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah. So the stolen land, hoarded resources on tour because we're untouring is something we launched on Mama Earth Day in 2016. And it's an extremely important, part of the decolonizing and de-gentra effing. I call it something else. I don't know if we're on the FCC. I guess not. Gentra fucking. There you go. I just said it.
We're trying to keep it family friendly, but I
There you
think
go. Sorry. Yeah, I have to cut that out. Anyway, but the bottom line is, we launched them because we realized that this powerful work that we were doing at Homefulness, we also needed to share, but also more equally importantly, is we needed to connect all these dots of colonial terror on First Nations folks who've been teaching us ways of taking care of Mama Earth since, way before any settler got here. But whose lands are desecrated, whose sacred shell mounds are considered parking lots. Shout out to West Berkeley Shell Mound. Shout out to Segorte Land Trust and Karina and so many more and Fui Fui. But also the relationship between land itself as a commodity, Mama Earth itself as something to buy and sell, um, and the way that that then lands as well, and very importantly, on houseless people.
hmm
And, right? And how is it that Mama Earth is seen as a commodity? And how did we all begin this process of believing what I now call private property is a settler lie? How
yeah,
did we, right? And how, and once you're in that game, right? Once you're in that belief system, it is really about how much can I get, sort of the what I call the I got mines struggle. How,
right.
right? How much Mama Earth can I accumulate, collect, hoard? How much bloodstained dollars can I accumulate, collect, and hoard? And then, just have it. And now somehow I'm safe. And again, critiquing even that that class supremacist, white supremacist notion of safe, and then how it ends up landing as police terror. I say that to say we've been doing these beautiful untours. We launched them on Mama Earth Day right here in Ochin and Yalamu, Frisco, and we go into neighborhoods that we're not invited into. As a matter of fact, when poor people and houseless folk and black and brown people go into these neighborhoods, the police are called always. And it's always funny. Me and Leroy say, how long will it take? It's more like it's never an if, it's a when.
I
Uh,
heard it was a little dicey up in Washington.
Very crazy, crazy. I mean, I'll start back at Beverly Hills because that's where we had a police escort. Like,
Oh, you got escorted.
yeah, 'cause we needed that. We needed that. What can
Yeah.
I say, right? But fast forward to we went to Park Avenue. We've been we also in the same process we lift up indigenous resistance and land back movements because they're all connected, right? And make sure that folks who've been police terrorized are also lifted up as these are all connected. but in the Hamptons, just great little anecdote for people.
We went to the Hamptons.
Oh yeah, we did, which was in and of it was in and of itself really, really crazy. And Ibaye Lori McElroy, I love you, hon. And she's transitioned, with this, but whew, trauma of poverty, man, is real. But anyway, she was on that one along with, Auntie Frances and some other warriors from the Poor Magazine Village. Homefulness I'm just one part. But we went to the Hamptons, and one of the amazing, crazy settler lies is that people never hear about the indigenous people of the Hamptons. There is a reservation in the Hamptons, Sue.
What?
Yeah.
I did not know.
Yeah, no, because no one does, right? It's the Shinnecock Nation, and they have get right in the middle of this insane wealth hoarding, right, reality.
Right.
This little tiny reservation that doesn't even have more. I don't. Maybe 1,000 people, I guess. Whatever of the, sort of like these warriors, these Shinnecock warriors who refuse to give up. But anyway, the highest rate of child poverty is on that reservation, right in the middle of that land, right? Just holding all that, right? Holding that hypocrisy, as I call it, in our hearts right now. And anyway, so that's just a really bizarre and frightening example. And we continue to do these, and we've done them in the Philadelphia's main line, so-called, and all that's intense wealth hoarding. But anyway, recently we went up to occupied Squaxin territory, aka Olympia, Washington. We went to so-called Fort Bragg, aka occupied Pomo territory. Again, these beautiful parts of Mama Earth that were long ago stolen. And then the wealth hoarders and the land stealers never even recognized that they were actually complicit in the stealing.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I mean? And it's such an unteaching. So any of your listeners and viewers who watch you or are thinking through these decolonizing, it's an unteaching to get to a place to recognize that without ever thinking about it and with no malcontent perhaps, and you have now become part of the theft. You have now, right? You are complicit in that abuse. And so I say it always with love, Sue, because that's how I try to move in the world. And it's hard because I come from all this trauma of the experience of this, my life and my mama's life and my village. But the reality is I don't totally blame people. I don't blame people at all for what they were sold and told as fact, right?
Yeah, they stayed in those institutions until they were 18, and they were told every year over and over again these settler lies, right? Yeah. How would they not believe it?
Thank you.
We've been completely brainwashed since birth.
Yeah.
And I've considered myself pretty radical throughout my youth and adulthood, and yet I feel like I've just turned the corner in decolonizing my mind to be able to see my participation.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's really hard.
Thank you.
That's really hard.
It's well, and it's hard too because it makes you feel, that weird thing that none of us humans want to feel, which is that somehow we're at fault, or somehow we're some part of the cause of the problem. And I always say that to say to people, recognize that it doesn't take one seminar, one class, 1 year to decolonize something that's been considered a truth for over 528 years, right? And that, right, that there's no fault here. There's a call to action, a call to liberation, a call to recognition. And we always invite people to come to People School, which is a 2-day seminar.
That was one of my questions. Tell us about People School, Tiny.
Well, there you go. There you go. So People School is a trip because it's a 2-day session. It's on Zoom now, thanks to the terror of COVID. But we ended up putting it on Zoom, so it's anyone from all over the world can go now, and it's always only twice a year, so people should think about going to the next one. It's in Black August, the last weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And really, it's a decolonization, degentrification seminar to help people unpack the 528 years of lies, the cult of separation, the away nation, and the cult of independence that we're all fed, and to recognize and start to look inward about what needs to happen for your own healing. In other words, we don't spend the time necessarily, just like yelling or talking to people about what was wrong. That the problem is clear. What we actually help people do is recognize their role in it and what they need to do to heal. The medicine that's necessary, and that's it's pretty transformative. I've been told, change people's lives. So, it's coming up. I would urge people to check it out. It was funny because, oh God. So when we were up in so-called Washington, right, and we're down the street of really pretty extreme wealth hoarders. So the mayor lived there, right? And the mayor it was a trip. So she tried to run us over with her car, because that's what the politricksters do, I guess. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, it was not even a joke. She did try to run us over. Yeah, it was a trip. And then she gets out of the car, and like just left her car in the middle of the road and, of course, didn't get it towed or arrested or anything. If any of us did that, it would be, but she just gets out of her car and walks away and knows that it'll be protected, right? But anyway, and so if you watch the blip, you can see first thing I'm doing is, well, we're here to invite you to People School because we think it would be a good move for you to make. I know she didn't hear me, but I just want everybody to know that there's equal opportunity at People School. Politicians, academics, all ye, because it's real.
And I'm gonna link to it down in the description. The People School information. You can also just go yourself to poormagazine.org and you'll be able to find People School there. This link I have up here is in case you're inspired to be a revolutionary donor. Please go to this website and just drop your spare change in there because there's always a need. And even if all you were doing was People School, I think that would be a large enough public service for your entire life, But I know you're doing a million other things.
Right. At all times.
At all times. And I might add, learning to take care of yourself in the midst of it. And I'm really happy that that's true because I was worried about you a little bit in the last few years. And I know how important it is that you stay here with us to do this work. I don't want to do it without you. So I'm glad you're learning to take care of yourself. And I'm going to keep working on it too. And I feel like People School was really transformative for me, and it continues to be. I took it really seriously when you gave us homework, and I've continued the homework because I'm such a geek,
Yes.
And it's been really good for me because, recently I was in a nonprofit industrial complex job, right, during the COVID pandemic because I didn't have enough money saved up to weather the storm, and all of my income dried up overnight. So I was like, I better get a job.
Yeah. That part.
I got a job. Thanks to my education privilege, that's never hard for me to get a job. But what was hard was walking back away from it.
Wow.
Once I had that security for a year
Yep.
of same paycheck every 2 weeks,
Yep.
it was kind of hard to pull
Yeah.
away. Even though I told them when they hired me, I'm only here for about a year, you know?
Wow.
And I told them 3 months before I left, I'm going to be leaving in a few months.
Wow.
Still terrified
Yeah. Yeah.
to
It's
walk
real.
away.
It's
And
real.
yeah. And then when I did walk away, I was like, ooh, should I stay a therapist and continue this journey I've been on to get licensed and, therefore legitimized by the white supremacist institutions,
Yeah.
or should I pivot because I have this hopeful tribe I want to build and just call myself a life coach, right? Because you don't need to have, a license to be a life coach.
Yeah.
And I have 33 years of experience,
That's right.
mostly on the streets, right?
I wanna lift up Sue's beautiful skills as a life coach right now, and any of you are listening, check her out because love moves with love, liberation, and all the medicine you need. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, thank you. And I finally got it, like, oh, I don't have to,
Right.
I have the skills and the experience. I don't need to do all that. Why am I wasting my time on that?
Right.
There's
Right.
only so much time and energy we have,
Thank
you
you.
know,
Yeah.
especially as we're getting older. Right?
Yeah. For real. For real. For
But I'm so grateful to you for coming
no
and
problem.
to Mama
And,
D
yeah.
and the whole fam
Yep.
for allowing you to be here.
Ashe. Well, I want to say before I leave, people should check out poorpress.net. You can also follow us on the digital streets, at Poor Magazine on Twitter, Instascam, Poor News Network on Facebook, Instagram, all that. And then Poor News Network on YouTube. And people want to hear more of my work, you can get to my website, LisaTinyGrayGarcia.com, and I do like a podcast and other things. And then we do Poor People's Radio. Like we have a liberation radio station at Homefulness. And, I really just to kind of finalize so that people understand what we're doing isn't really like anything else in the US. And so if you're trying to place it, you should just stop because what we're trying to do is really, what I call innovation to liberation. And it's about
Yes.
unselling and unsettling Mama Earth, one small piece of her at a time. And this is not just a dream. We've got 6 of the units already built. We have 9 units trying to go online right now. We're actually calling out for people to join us at Oakland City Hall on Tuesday at 4:30 because the permit gangsters, as I affectionately call them, of Oakland, are blocking our finalizing these buildings. And it's taken us 11 years, but we've built housing for houseless folks like ourselves. This is a very different, a powerful thing, but it's very similar to the Zapatistas in Chiapas, to the Movimiento Sin Tierra in Brazil, the Shack Dwellers Union in South Africa, Move Africa, Long Live John Africa. So for these kind of landless people's movements, really, folks supporting is the only way that we continue. So we appreciate any support. And we love you, Sue, so much.
I love you, Tiny.
All right. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay. Take good care of yourself.
I will. And you too.